Hello, my name is Cherie, and if you're new to my channel, thanks so much for stopping by. Today we're going to be talking about two different machines because a lot of people ask, what is better to collect, Japanese vintage machines or American made? So these are two different machines. The Imdeco JA21 is on the left, and it is a Japanese made machine, and the Singer 404 is an American made machine. Both of these machines were made in the 1950s, so I thought it'd be wonderful to compare and contrast both of these machines. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Imdeco J21 represents an era because just after World War II, the Japanese started importing a ton of Japanese-made sewing machines into the United States. And back then, Japan was the China of the United States, meaning they imported a lot of cheap goods. So the Imdeco is considered a cheapie or a generic sewing machine, whereas the Singer was the premium brand of the day. So let's see if the differences between these machines mean a ton in the quality or if they're both fairly the same. So the Imdeco is the same color scheme as the Singer. It's just the Singer is a flat brown, whereas the Imdeco has a little specks of silver inside of that brown finish. And in my personal opinion, the Imdeco's paint finish looks a little better. And there's also a hint of white on the plate of the machine so that it breaks up the monotony of that brown color palette or color scheme. Whereas on the right, the Singer is pretty much an all brown machine with just a touch of cream on the top. So your opinions about the color scheme are quite subjective, but personally I think that the Imdeco looks a tad bit better in terms of color quality. But the color quality really doesn't matter so much as the performance. So let's get to talking about some of the things about the performance of both machines. The first thing that I noticed about the Imdeco versus the Singer is the screws. So you can't pay attention to the screws on the needle plate of the Imdeco because those are aftermarket, but all the other screws on the machine are just regular flat head screws. Whereas on the Singer, you have these screws that have bluing applied to them, I think, and that coating applied to the screws makes it more of a quality screw, and it seems stronger than the screws that are on the Imdeco. Another thing to notice about the machine is that the Imdeco is a straight and zigzag stitch machine that also comes with design cams. Now this 404 is only a straight stitch machine. However, Singer came out with a whole line of 400 series machines, and some of those machines were too straight and zigzag with the design cams. I will say that the design cams on the Imdeco are a regular plastic, but the design cams that come with the Singer are more of a Bakelite and more of a quality plastic than the plastic that is on the Imdeco. We're going to continue this conversation, but before we do, please do like, subscribe, tap the notification bell, and if you haven't already, please do visit my website at thimblebook.com. I want to jump away from the body of the machine for a second and talk about the accessories. The Imdeco only came with a zigzag foot, but on a lot of the other Japanese machines that I have gotten in the past, those machines often come with a zigzag foot, a straight stitch foot, the zipper foot, and usually a buttonhole foot of some sorts. But the Imdeco only came with the zigzag foot. And I noticed that the feet on most of the Japanese made machines are a lot chunkier and more clumsily made than the Singer presser feet. The Singer presser feet are really finely milled and really small so that you can really see your work when you're sewing. And that's not just due to the slant shank, because I have had low shank machines and other Singer machines in the past, and those feet were also really nicely made. As far as the feed dogs on the sewing machine go, the feed dogs on the Imdeco are far more primitive, and 90% of the Japanese machines that you'll find share the same feed dog system. Yes, the feed dogs do lower and raise, but it is a system that runs on a spring, and that system sometimes breaks but is easily replaceable because the system is so primitive. Whereas on the Singer 404, it's not the feed dogs that raise and lower, but the actual needle plate that raises and lowers, and it's a much more complex system than what is on the Indeco. While one system is more complex than the other, I still would say that I prefer the Indeco's system because it's just more comfortable to sew with the plate staying in one position versus the plate moving up and down when you're trying to sew a project. One other thing about these two machines that I found interesting is that the Imdeco's gears and all the parts don't look finely milled. They look quite rough, and it's almost like the tools that you would buy from Harbor Freight that aren't really finely milled and that are kind of rough. Whereas on the Singer, all of the parts and gears are really finely milled and it's smooth to the touch. That might not make a huge difference to you, but to me, it does make a difference because it's the difference between driving a truck and driving a car. The Indeco is more like driving a truck, but the Singer is more like driving a smooth car. You would think that the Imdeco would be much louder than it actually is because of how it is milled, but I find that the Imdeco is actually a lot quieter than the Singer, and I will insert here what both machines sound like so that you can make that assessment for yourself. The other thing that I think of when I think of these two machines is the thought that went into the bottom of the machine. So on the Imdeco, it is just the guts of the machine are just out. So when you oil your machine, that oil can drip down onto your clothes or onto whatever surface that you're working on. But on the Singer, they chose to give us an oil pan so that the guts of the machine are not exposed and the oil drips down into the oil pan and not onto you. And also, because it has an oil pan, that means that you can use this machine tabletop and that you don't have to put it into a table. You don't have to put the Imdeco in a table either because it has feet. However, I don't see why you would want to put the Imdeco on a table given that all the oil and grease and things are going to drip down onto your work surface. The lighting on the machines. So the lighting on the Imdeco and most of the vintage Japanese machines that you find will be located on the right side. Now there are a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, all of the lights are located on the right of the machine. But on the Singer, the light is centralized in the center so that the light spreads across the whole entire bed of the machine. That is a major thing for a lot of people, especially who are visually impaired and need much more lighting when they're sewing a project. So the foot control on the Imdeco has a light motor block foot control, and the cords is just a lot of cords. Even with the original foot control, there were a lot of cords because you have one cord that is coming from the light, another cord is coming from the motor. They both plug into a receptacle, and then the foot control itself has to be plugged into the wall. So you have three plugs there. But on the Singer, you have a plug for the light that plugs into the side of the machine, a plug for the foot control, which also plugs into the side of the machine. And then there's only one cord that goes directly into the wall. So it is a little bit better in its cord management than with the MDeco because you only have one plug versus having three on the MDeco. As far as the motors are concerned, 100% of the Japanese made machines are going to have a belted motor. There are a few exceptions with machines that are friction driven, but for the most part, they're belt driven if they're a Japanese machine. And belt driven machines work fine. It's just that that belt has to be the right size, or you're going to get friction on the belt and it's going to get caught up and you're going to have to use your hand wheel to help it. Also, the belt, you lose some of the power from the motor in the transference of the energy from the motor to the belt to the needle. So it's going to have a little bit less punching power than if you have a gear driven machine. And the Singer is gear driven, so you have a little bit more power in the Singer than on the MDeco. So what is the verdict? Is it better to have a Japanese made fitness machine or an American made one? Well, I think that there's no straight answer on it. It depends on what your purposes are. If you're looking to collect vintage machines and you want a bunch of beautiful vintage machines to go on a bookshelf, then I most certainly would go with a Japanese made machine because they look better. But if I were going to be making garments or if I were going to be quilting, I most likely would go with a Singer or some other American made or even Swiss made machine because you have a wider variety of presser feet and accessories that come with the machine, and it's made to a little bit better quality than a lot of the Japanese machines. Now, if I were going to occasionally sew jeans or boat sails or something like that, and I wasn't looking into getting a walking foot machine, you would think that I would go with the Singer, but I actually would not. While the motor is more capable, it has much finer tuning on a machine like that Singer. So I would most likely go with the Indeco for that because if I were to ever knock it out of timing, I know that I could just go right underneath the machine and tighten up a screw and get it right back in timing very quickly. Whereas with the Singer, because it's a more complex machine, I would have to take apart a lot more in order to make the adjustments, and it would be a little bit more difficult to make the adjustments. So for that reason, I probably would go with something like the Indeco if I were going to do a heavy duty project every once in a while. Now, I do know that domestic machines are not made for doing heavy duty projects, but a lot of people do heavy duty projects on these sorts of machines, and it can handle it every once in a while, but I just wouldn't do it all of the time. But those are my thoughts about that aspect of it. Now, I'm not saying that Japanese machines are lesser than, because they're not, because over time the Japanese really improved on the designs. I see a huge difference between the Japanese machines of the 1950s and the Japanese machines of the 60s. They they improved by leaps and bounds. And my personal favorites are the Kenmore machines and the Morris machines. Those are some very, very quality, nicely made machines. So, guys, please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Would you rather go with a vintage Japanese machine or a vintage American made one? Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe to receive more sewing related content. Peace.